Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and a series of introductory comments on Tom Stoppard's play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. Let's make some introductory observations and then finish with some focus that we want to have as we begin our viewing of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. We've just finished our study of Shakespeare's Hamlet, yes? And so now we turn to a text called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. Of course, you're going to recognize that line from the very end of the play Hamlet, when the messengers come back from England to report Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. We did what the king ordered, and of course the king Claudius is now dead, along with the queen, along with Hamlet, and of course, well, the king didn't actually command that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern die. That was, of course, the whole gig with Hamlet, changing the letter up when he was on the boat with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern headed towards England. Of course, the letter said it was to be Hamlet who would have his head chopped off, and instead Hamlet will report, "I always hated school, but I found in this moment it was useful because I could then write like a king, and I had my father's signet ring, and so I basically just changed the letter, wrote a different letter that said, upon receiving this letter, please cut off the heads of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern." And so at the end of the play, without maybe often realizing it, Hamlet is responsible for two more deaths. I mean, you could constitute this as murder of a kind as well. A play about death will end with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead is kind of a throwaway line. Tom Stoppard, the great playwright, and he wrote a really important script for a movie as well that won an Academy Award called Shakespeare in Love, will take the play Hamlet, will take this final line, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and will ask a most provocative question that you want in your notes. That question is simply this: what is going on behind the scenes of the play Hamlet while the play is going on? Now, of course, the literal answer to this is, what are you talking about? When Polonius isn't on stage, he's backstage in the dressing room, probably having a smoke and relaxing and getting a drink before he comes back on stage to get stabbed behind the curtain. No. That's not the question. The question is rather this: if we were to suspend disbelief and we were to simply say, the play Hamlet that Shakespeare creates is actually the creation of a full real world, where there's all this stuff going on, right? In other words, when you watch the play Hamlet, you're kind of expected to accept that this is true. So that when, for example, the king is talking about Hamlet, you are aware that Hamlet, the actor, is off stage. But that Hamlet, the character, is, he's got to be somewhere, right? I mean, doing something, right? Okay? Stoppard asks of us, then, as a 20th century writer, to take the play Hamlet and to look at it from a new perspective. Consider that word picture of Hamlet picking up Yorick's skull and holding it up and seeing Yorick again from a different perspective. Where are your jibes now? Where are your jokes now? Oh, I'm holding his skull. I mean, you can look to the person next to you and wonder, what will it be like if I ever have to hold that individual skull in my hand? Gross, that's a gross kind of word picture. It is a gross word picture, but notice how in that moment it makes you think of the world differently, or your skull being held by someone. Remember, Hamlet makes this identification when he's holding Yorick's skull by saying, hey, you need to get to my lady's chamber, Ophelia, and tell her she better Maybelline up, put on lots of makeup, because this is what she's going to look like. Which is, of course, a very interesting way to think about Victoria's Secret models. The next time you're at the mall and you walk by one of those beautiful posters of those drop-dead gorgeous women, think of Yorick's skull. That is exactly what Shakespeare wants us to do. And of course, he didn't invent this idea. This takes us back to Plato, doesn't it, right? Okay? And the idea, remember, in that whole notion of the theory of the forms, that everything sags and bags, and in the end, this is what we all come to, food for worms, Hamlet will say. Stoppard will take all then of the dynamism of the play Hamlet, and he will pick two flat characters, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. About these two flat characters, he will simply ask, who are these people? Who are these characters who in the play even at times it's not quite certain which is which? When Hamlet, for example, meets Rosencrantz and Guildenstern for the first time, he saw, hey, Rosencrantz, Guildenstern. They will, of course, report, hey, we're your old school buddies. Obviously, they're not very close to Hamlet, and Hamlet's not very close to them. And, of course, Hamlet quickly ascertains they've been sent in to spy on him, and he says, you're not gonna get anything from me. And later he says, I will watch them as two serpents fanged. In other words, I know they're out to jack me. Stoppard asks, though, a more humane question about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Aren't they people? I mean, they are characters, but aren't they people? And who are they? So he writes a play, which is really a play within a play, and dare we say it, within a play. That notion of that kind of onion, or for the Shrek fans in the house, parfait, effect of Hamlet will take one more step for Stoppard, and he will tell the story of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern from the perspective of the play Hamlet. So you can't, I mean, you can watch the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead without knowing the play Hamlet. And in fact, a number of years ago, we took a group of students to a live performance of this play, and one or two of them were younger and hadn't yet studied the play Hamlet, and they just went. And they reported that they thought the play was funny. So let's go ahead and put that in your notes right away. Many viewers of this play initially will say it is one of the most comic, funny plays they've ever seen. And you're going to laugh. I promise you, you will laugh as you watch this play, okay? Some of you, because we are an AP class and we know our Monty Python's Holy Grail, some of you will in fact see that British funny haha humor like Monty Python's Holy Grail is actually coming through right away. But if you know the play Hamlet, you will understand that Stoppard is doing something far more important than simply entertaining, in the same way that Shakespeare did something far more important than simply entertain those groundlings standing in front of the stage. Let's say now 3 things about this play as we begin to think about viewing it, all right? 1, first and most importantly, this is a play about language. One of my students, AP students, once said that actually you could have renamed this play not Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, but we can all say it together, words, words, words. What is it you read, my lord? Polonius asks Hamlet. Oh, words, 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 which is, of course, technically what you're doing when you read, technically what you're doing when you're watching the play Hamlet. It's really nothing more than a bunch of words. Well, yeah. But now Stoppard is going to ask us to think about the linguistic dimensions of our existence, which is why this is often called a play. Long ago, we used to use the term existentialism. It was a system of philosophic discourse that's now kind of outmoded and outdated, but nonetheless, this play has often been referred to as an existentialist play. What does that mean? Well, it asks questions about the way we perceive ontology. So that's the next thing for us. If it's a play about language, it's a play about ontology. And by language, we might be able to say it's a play about epistemology. How do we know what we know? In the play, one of the two, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, will say, words, it's all we have to go on. This play will challenge us to think about then what we know vis-a-vis our language, and who we are vis-a-vis our language. Okay? How do we define who we are? Finally, number 3, this is a play that looks seriously at the questions of life and, of course, yes, death. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Of course, the last word of that line resurrects a whole series of philosophic inquiries about what is it to be alive and what is it to be dead. And is it the case that we've always known all our life that death was coming? You haven't met any 200-year-old people. And is it the case that the only difference really fundamentally between you and a fly is you know about fly swatters? Flies don't. And it is that knowledge of the fly swatter, certainly Freud said this, that leads to a certain kind of anxiety, dread of something after death, is what Hamlet calls it. The undiscovered country, remember, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will. This is a play about puzzling and the ways in which we're not always sure about what death is because we're not always sure about what it means to be alive. Like, what is that all about? And if you'll think about it at 3A, texts like the older film Matrix, questions, and of course there's been a whole slew of them since, these technology films question, what does it mean to be alive? Right? And of course in our technological age we ask the question about computer chess, for example. Is it doing chess or is it playing chess? So we have a tendency to think computer games don't play chess, they do chess. Do you do life or do you play life, if you can continue the metaphor? And how would you know, back to epistemology, who you are, back to ontology? And at the moment of your death, what is that actually like at all? Stoppard brilliantly draws, inspired by Shakespeare, on the notion that the stage is the place to think about this question. That's the whole point of those important scenes where Hamlet's talking about playing correctly. Don't out-Herod Herod. In other words, it is a mirror. Remember, we're using that Aristotelian idea from Poetics. Playing is a mirror that is held up. And then the audience kind of watches and sees themselves reflected back from the mirror. And you'll remember Aristotle argued that the true actors of any performance are not the people on stage, but rather the people watching. The game, of course, played in Hamlet is we have actors playing to Hamlet and, of course, Claudius to show Claudius's guilt. And we, the audience, are watching both of those at the same time. The genius of that is now layered one more time with Stoppard, and we will watch Rosencrantz and Guildenstern go through a whole series of, what? Like, what is going on? Where am I? Physically, geography. And what are we supposed to be doing? Purpose, intentionality. And how will we know when we've done our purpose? End product. How will we know we have lived the examined life? And now we're back to Plato's Apology. When Socrates famously said right before his death, the unexamined life is not worth living, Stoppard will ask, is the examined life worth living? If the unexamined life is not worth living, what about the examined life? And how would you even know what to examine? Because the last time a biologist spoke with you, he or she said, you're constantly changing. So who is it you're examining when you examine? What are you studying when you are thinking your thoughts? Who, of course, is doing the thinking in the end anyway? All of these questions will be subsumed. Or, as one of my students said famously in our class 303, this play is funny until it's not. Which begged the question, why is everything about mucus with you, S-N-O-T? No, not snot, but it's not. And we were, of course, playing the game of language. There's a pivotal moment in this play, and we watch the play for that moment. When instead of playing tennis with rackets and balls, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern will play tennis with language. It's a pivotal scene. You can read it and it doesn't really play well, but when you see it live, you go, oh, whoa. All of the day, for the rest of my day that I'm about to go through here at Welland High School, is about language. Words. I'm going to think in those words, like you're doing right now, even in silence, you're thinking in words. And I'm going to engage in words, where I'm talking, people are talking, and I'm listening. But the obvious question is, how much of those words do I really understand? Do I comprehend at all? How do I speak words that I know other people understand? Like when I say, for example, I love you to the person I love, what does that actually mean? A student watching this play decided that evening when her boy looked into her eyes, oh, I love you, he said. And she responded back, what do you mean? She had been watching this play, and she understood the significance of asking, what do you mean? The young man got quickly very upset. You know exactly what I mean. No, I know what you mean when you use the L word. What do you mean when you use the L word? Now he's getting frustrated. It's like, what are you talking about? We already know this. I know what it means to me. I want you to tell me what it means to you. Increasingly more frustrated. This play is, again, funny until it's not. And what do we begin with? A coin. And the flipping of a coin. And the introduction of the philosophic understanding of determinism or fate. In other words, are you free? Now, of course, we'll be talking a little bit later with Milton in Paradise Lost. And the answer to the whole theodictic question in Paradise Lost is, we have free will, we have choice, we have freedom to do what we want. This is, of course, going to be the question right away at the beginning of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Is it inevitable that in the end of the play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern will have their heads chopped off? And what does it mean to begin a play where a coin is flipped into the air and it keeps coming up heads? Let's enjoy the play and your viewing of the play and maybe your reading of the play. Thank you.